voices of the host and the guests you hear do not represent the views of Be Inspired Global, its sponsors, or advertisers.
Hello and welcome to Urban Health Beat, the show that feeds your mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Marilyn Harris Davis, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Hi, I'm Dr. Garry Jennings. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome. We have a new and improved look for this new year, and we totally welcome it. We have a very, very special guest who is launching a new initiative also for this new year. We're joined by Dr. David Sinclair Arnold. Dr. Arnold, I never knew what the S stood for. Dr. Arnold is a psychiatrist. And actually, I always say he could be my psychiatrist, but he's a psychiatrist, a specialist in Baltimore, Maryland, and has over 37 years of experience in the medical field. He graduated from the University of Nebraska at Kearney. We're correct on that, right, Dr. Arnold?
Yeah, at the University of Nebraska Medical Center.
Wow. Yeah, it must have been cold out there.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Arnold is also currently in a manager in acute care in patient psychiatry, in the patient psychiatry unit at Springfield Hospital Center. He has been the chief, and I know that's got to be a hard job for you, Dr. Arnold, hard job for anybody. He has been the chief of psychiatry at the Maryland Veterans Affairs Health System. Also, little known fact, he's a third-degree black belt in, what is it, Kenpo Karate.
Kenpo, yeah.
It's a man of many talents. Today we're talking about his new book, which is called The Power Within, and The Art of Change, subtitle, The Art of Change and Self-Therapy. This is not Dr. Arnold's first book. He has two previous other books, which we will also talk about. But welcome, Dr. Arnold. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always a joy to be on your show, and I think you're doing a great job at spreading a lot of health issues to the community, and as your viewership grows, I'm sure you're going to change a lot of things here in Baltimore. So.
Yeah, we are about the health of the people here in Baltimore, and we're about the health of the people here in Baltimore and all over the United States and everywhere urban health is being seen.
Yes.
You know. And by the way, spoiler alert, or for
absolutely,
my middle name is also Sinclair.
Oh, I never knew that.
Your middle name is also Sinclair, Garry?
Garry Sinclair. Okay. Jennings,
okay, so that must be a generational thing or something, right?
Yeah. I have to check my ancestry site, you know.
Ancestry.com.
Probably cousins.
You might be. Yeah, we have to look into that. So, okay. Dr. Arnold, I know that you have two other books, and we have spoken about them, and we will get to them near the end of the show, and we will revisit them because they are also out there, and they're very important. But I wanted to know about The Power Within and The Art of Change and Self-Therapy. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, you know, what really inspired me was, as I was growing up, I kind of, did work for the Red Cross when I was in high school. I had a grandmother who was ill, that my mother had to take care of. And as I was growing up, I was trying to find out what was the biggest impact you could have on our community. And I saw people being treated for hypertension, diabetes, other disorders that are, fairly common in our community. But I felt that the one thing that we really need, which I think is starting to come on the rise now, is where people start examining themselves on the inside and looking at how they can change themselves and the power of self-creation, where you can actually understand with a clear model who we are and who you are as a person and what tools you have to actually create yourself and become the person you want to become.
Dr. Jennings?
Some introspection on the person's part. Are you saying that, with the diabetes and hypertension that you see in our community, a lot of that comes from stress or not knowing who we are inside?
Yes, and it definitely has an impact on that. When you look at the daily stresses that people go through, working 2 jobs, trying to raise a family, working in a system that's really, in many ways, designed against them and causing more stress, it becomes even more important for people to understand who they are and what power they have inside themselves to change the circumstances.
Well, we see that the incidence of high blood pressure and diabetes and obesity are increasing. Is that because, or does it also mean that our stressors are increasing at the same time?
Yeah, I think stress has been increasing over time, and then it ties into how we deal with the stress.
I'm sorry.
So it can be involved with it influences our diet. So we have, unfortunately, a problem with obesity in our community, and that raises your risk of diabetes. It raises your risk of high blood pressure.
And how we handle the stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and right, right. Mm-hmm. And people handle the stress in multiple ways. Some people will drink, they use drugs to try to get around the stress. They will have problems like with their relationships, with the family situation, and unfortunately, take out their frustration and their anxiety on the people in the family and friends, which then kind of fractures the community even more and causes more problems and more stress.
Yeah, indeed. So the power within gives us strategies in terms of how to handle that.
Yeah. And so what it does is actually what I was looking for was the actual core of our power of who we are. And so I developed a model that actually is something you can visualize and understand how we're constructed. And I use the example of a gyroscope as the center for the center of our.
That is one of your other books, right?
Right,
Tell us
right, yeah.
about that.
And this book is actually like a revision of some of the previous works,
Mm-hmm.
So it's really I've kind of rewritten sections to add to the clarity of what I was saying, and so with the gyroscope, what it basically says is like, there's a gyroscope is a device that has like an inner wheel that you put a string in and you pull the string and then it spins at a high speed like a spinning top. And if you put it on top of a table, it'll stand straight up and it wants to stay in that same plane, that same direction. And if you try to tip it over, it'll flip back to where it was. And I say essentially that we are gyroscopic, that we have a gyroscope in the center of us. And what powers that gyroscope, all the things that we learn from our parents, from our friends, our families, from our community, from our teachers, and we absorb all this information as we're a child growing up.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, when this wheel is spinning so fast, it becomes very rigid in the way it is. And our perspective of the world is that, is kind of fixed. We see the world in a certain way. And because the wheel is spinning at such a high speed, when we get ideas that are counter to our experience or what we know, then it bounces off. So we, as an inherent part of our nature, we reject any information that's not consistent with what we know and what we believe. And as a result, we end up in darkness because we are unable to assimilate new information that might change our perspective and change who we are. But by having a good sense of that structure, then it kind of centers you and allows you to start to look at and examine your beliefs, your ideas, what you've been taught, um, in such a way that you can start beginning to change the transition to change and self-creation.
So how do you change a gyroscope? You would have to slow it down or even stop it and then restart it in a different direction. So is
No,
that meaning? Yeah,
Using that analogy.
Yeah, actually, you keep going. You keep going, and you understand who you are and what's inside, what's made you up, and then you begin to look at other information on the outside and gradually consider the new information. So at some point, you have to be able to open a window to allow the information to come through. Not that it means that you have to accept it or it has to change you immediately, but it's something you have to consider. And as you're considering the new information, then you can begin to make the changes, the gradual changes to with your idea of who you want to be, where you want to be in the future, by changing those different items.
Well, who tells us who we are? Is it ourselves or is it the world?
Yeah, and yeah, as you're growing up, when I was talking about the inner wheel, we get feedback from media, from the world at large, from our families, from our community,
Parents.
all the rest of us feeding in. And children are like sponges; they absorb everything. So everything, and they're traveling at a rate that's about 10 times what we're traveling during the day in terms of taking new information in. The issue is that they haven't developed their defenses yet to be able to selectively take information in. They take everything in. And as a result, they have no filters and they absorb everything. So it impacts our children's self-esteem when they're told that they're not a part of the major society, that they don't have what it takes to become whatever they want to become. And they absorb that and it goes into their unconscious, and they're unaware of all the things they've absorbed. And so the book goes into that about the unconscious and the things that are there that we have to examine and challenge within ourselves in order to move forward.
I hear you on that. I hear you on that. So for folks that are not as introspective as we may be, how do we get there? What are the clues them to that space?
Okay. Yeah. So people who aren't as introspective, it's really a skill set, that people have to develop to begin to examine themselves, you know, and and it takes a bit of work, in order to examine yourself and then see what's going on, because it often is tied to our mood and to our emotions, and that
It's a
can
lot
get
of
in the
work.
way.
I know that to do self-change.
Hmm. Yes. Uh-huh. So it can kind of get in the way, and so you have to be able to work through your feelings, through your emotions and concern, frustration, all those things to begin to work on those things. But as you go along, you then build a tolerance for that. You can understand what the emotions are, and that they're actually separate from what your goal is, which is to really examine what's there. You know.
So I find the word power in your title to be very interesting. So we are seeking the power within. We do have the
Yes.
power to change. Is that
Yeah.
that's the theme? We have the power to change. We need to we need to grab that power. We need to acknowledge that power, as opposed to thinking that we're helpless to change our circumstances, because everybody has circumstances that they, not everybody, but a lot of people have circumstances that they would want to change, but we have the power to do that.
That's correct. Yeah, and the thing is that I searched for several decades to try to find what was the thing that was really cuts through everything and goes to the
Hmm.
core of us. And understanding this, the gyroscope model gives you something physical you can look at and visualize, and it actually shows you how we're constructed. And so the power is your power to recognize that, to see it everywhere. So when I've had people read the book, they've come back to me and said, "Oh, I'm starting to see it in everything. I'm seeing it in everything, in people, in systems. You know, and I think it's a universal force. But that's I think if there's any genius of the book is that it's the universal force. It's something that's in nature. I think it's inherent, just like gravity or inertia, any other things, any physical forces. That it's
Wow.
a constant, and and it's how the universe operates.
Wow.
Um, um,
One of the words you said was inertia. So we have a certain inertia, as you were saying, as we become an adult, to stay the way we are. It sounds as if you reach a point where you don't want to learn new things. Um,
I'm
in,
sorry
in,
to interrupt you, Dr. Jennings. What is inertia?
yeah,
Inertia.
and yeah, it's a
No.
resistance.
I wasn't interrupting.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
I'm sorry. I was just asking Gary.
mhm.
Inertia is the how would I put it, the ability or the desire to stay the way you are,
Okay.
to not change, to move
Okay.
in the same direction where you're moving. But I
Mm-hmm.
was to say that you have this certain amount of inertia. Don't you have to really be honest with yourself and let your ego go? Because some people can say, you know what, I'm the greatest, and they can be doing things that are actually, say for instance, I was looking, one person is gaining weight, and instead of saying, I'm gaining weight, I may not be healthy, their ego says, hey, I'm getting thick. But this is muscle, and it really is like too many donuts, but they say it's muscle. Don't you have to be honest with yourself first?
Yes,
Well, we see that in a lot of women, but go ahead.
yeah, and I covered that in the book, and I get into the area of cognitive dissonance, where we can have two different ideas in our head. So, for instance, we can, if you're smoking cigarettes, you can have one idea in your head that it causes cancer. Okay. You also have the other idea in your head that I relax, it helps me stay focused, it wakes me up in the morning, and we're constantly battling with that in our head. But we try to have one that tends to win out over the other, and so you continue smoking because you get the benefit from it. You can see the benefit, you know. So we constantly do that to ourselves, and the book goes into how you can start to address that, that one issue, you know, that,
Mhm.
that serves as part of the inertia, kind of a barrier to you moving ahead, you know. But the part of the book is on the cover of the book, I had a picture of my son when he was at a beach, and it's like a photo negative, right?
Yeah.
And the photo negative is there because what I'm saying essentially is that we all live in darkness, that we're blind to everything around us, and we see just the world from our perspective. And
Yeah.
as a result, we lose out on everything else that we could be doing, and we lose out on the process of self-creation.
Hmm. Yeah, I noticed that on the cover of your book. It was like a double negative, and I'm glad you addressed that because I was going to ask you about that a little later on.
Yeah, yeah. Because in the book, I talk about when you do self-therapy and you're moving through this process of examining yourself and then moving forward, that it's similar to like a person standing in a dark field at midnight, and it's kind of like a lightning storm in the distance. And every now and then you get a flash of lightning. And as the person standing there in total
Wow.
darkness, they may see the rocks around them or water on the ground or
Mm.
boulders or pits, and it appears to them for a second, then it disappears. And they have a picture in their head and they say, oh, they see the world really as it is,
Hmm.
you know. But then
Wow.
with each successive flash of lightning, they get more pictures, and at some point, they can take all those pictures and fuse it into a solid image that they a roadmap in their head, and they know where everything is. and so they use it as a guide to get around falling into a pit or tripping into water or whatever.
Mhm.
And so the therapy, the self-therapy process is along those lines. That as you're going through, it's a journey. As you're getting these pictures of, from time to time, get an insight and say, wow, I'm handling things this way, or I'm seeing things from this perspective. But then you get a different picture, a different view. That window opens, and you get information that's different than what you experienced already, than what you believe. And then it starts to change your perspective on where you are in the world and what what your power is.
Yeah.
That's when you start to learn your power. That's where the power within is. When you can start to understand this model and then start to apply it and actually make changes, and you'll see them. And you'll see it in other people too, and how they approach you.
Hmm. I see. So we have the power within to make these changes. We just have to access it.
Yeah.
Would that be the word?
Yeah. And to have a model that you're using that kind of
Mhm.
keeps you on the right path.
Mhm.
And so, throughout the centuries, people have tried to come up with, a right path, a way to follow, and usually it comes through the forms of like religion or through politics or through media and that type of thing, movies and other things, to kind of show you which direction you should be taking, And, but the fact is that there are multiple paths.
Yeah,
And what
that's
may not
what
be right for us. Each
Yeah.
person has their own set of circumstances and their own needs in the world and own goals in life.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. How do you identify what the right path is?
Right.
I guess
And
that's part of the journey.
that's
Hmm.
part of the journey. And that's why I brought it down to this model, is because
Hmm.
it's pure in the sense that it's not espousing any religious beliefs, or anything else, not espousing, a doctrine set by a company or anything else. It's actually getting at the core of who you are and giving you something that's a pure model that you can understand yourself with, and without having to take a path or anything else, because there are multiple paths, and that's what leads to confusion in our lives. Because we have so many paths put before us, we don't know which one to choose, and what you're pulled in one direction or another, and don't really get to your own inner power, your own inner strength,
Yeah.
to shape yourself and to create yourself.
Well, how would you know? I mean, I can understand why you would change a path because it's not working for you.
Uh-huh.
How would you know that you're on the correct path?
Right. Yeah. And so and the correct path has to be from inside. So a lot of people look externally for the direction to be on the path, and so they may go to a monastery and study, to follow their spirituality. They may go to a karate studio to learn the path. They may go to
Yeah.
into a profession and take that as their path in life.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
but that's not, and it may work for them to some degree, but then often as they're going down that path, they start having questions about, is this right for me? Where am I headed in my
Hmm.
life? Is this really making me happy? You know, and a lot of the happiness comes from actually inside. It has to be something that you're directing and that you're creating and taking responsibility for yourself, for your own self creation, and not counting on external sources to tell you who you should be or where you should be going.
Hmm.
And that's what the
Well, I
book's
know that
about. Is
that's what the
that
book it addresses that because I understand that a lot of people make career changes
hmm
because they're not happy inside. I guess
right?
that's called the power within,
Yeah,
and they make lifestyle changes. They might make changes in their marriage situation or
Mhm.
friendships. So we look to strategies to handle those changes. Is that
right.
accurate?
And sometimes when people are doing that, they get confused, as to what they should be doing. And a lot of the unhappiness comes from the fact that they're trying to follow an external lead instead of looking inside and finding their own source of strength and what's going to make them happy. So people hear all the time, people get married because it was time for me to get married. I was at that age.
Right.
And they get married, and it's because of external sources telling them they should get married, and then they should have kids because the grandparents want kids. They want them to have children, and all these other sources.
Excuse me, are you talking right now or no?
Or people can
right.
or people can get divorced because they're not happy and find out that they're just as miserable being single because they're looking for, as you were saying, to change my outside situation when the issue wasn't what was on the outside, the issue was what was on the inside.
And part of the point of this book is that it's always on the inside. It's never on the outside. The external circumstances are things that you can actually manipulate in your life and get them in line with who you are and what you want to do, and be yourself. Because if you're not being yourself, then you're just playing a role for the external sources.
But so there are people who have this.
So
how can people get this? How can people get this?
Okay. Well, the first thing is, I think what causes, you're talking about the inertia. I think there are a lot of people who are fearful of being with themselves. They would rather just kind of follow the guidelines outside.
A lot of people that they don't have to think
about their life according to what they're expecting. Rather than looking inside, because the fear is what am I going to find inside? And do I have the strength? Do I have the power? There's a fear of failure that you're not going to be able to make those changes.
Or maybe you won't like yourself. You won't, like you said, you won't like what you find.
Yeah. And getting
once you're with yourself, man, like yourself. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and in the unconscious, we have what's called the shadow self, which is the negative self. Very destructive part of ourselves, and that's a natural part of the psyche. It's part of what I get into the book. So people are afraid of finding that negative part of themselves. But it comes out every now and then when with road rage, with all types of things where people become very hostile and aggressive and destructive.
But when they
So we kind of fear that part of ourselves, when we start that this.
and we're all not. Let me just say, none of us are perfect.
No, not by any means. Actually, I can go as far as to say that all of us are pretty much the same.
Imperfect.
Yes, and let me just say, none of us are perfect, and we. Yeah, but I don't know. Do we accept what I'm asking you? Do we accept the negative parts of ourselves sort of balance? But I guess what the point of your book is saying that we can change that and we can be good all the time. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No. Okay. We can't change the negative part of ourselves.
We can change that.
We can embrace it because it's a natural part of us. What we can change is our behavior and how we act. And how we channel that. Channel that energy.
Yes.
So in other words, if a person has a bad temper, and that's the inside, and that's a negative part, they can react differently. They can, when they get in a situation, they can walk away.
Correct, right. and they also can get more tap into more of their positive side, the giving side of themselves, and make that part of their life journey. You know, and
Yeah.
life.
It's true. It's true. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's sort of like
Where can we get your? Where can we get your book?
You can get it on Amazon.com. It's coming
I'm sorry?
now in
Say that again.
yeah, and Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. It's on both sites, you know. And it's The Power Within. If you
Great.
just type in David S. Arnold, MD, it'll come up, you know, on the thing, you know. And I had the older books there. This book is has a lot of the material from the previous books, but good to get the one that says The Power Within, because I've kind of added some sections and updated the language there. So people will find that probably better.
Yeah.
It's also Kindle, you know, comes in Kindle.
And your other books, what were your other books called?
And the other one was iMind.
Oh, that's good to know. It comes in Kindle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
So
that's
this
good to
one's-
know. It comes in Kindle.
So it's better to get the current edition, you know, the Power Within. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So
All
talking
right.
about,
Okay, well, good. The Power Within.
so you was talking about inertia. Maybe people need to get off their
I'm
butt
sorry?
and go get that, right?
Oh, yeah. And I think and I'm hoping
Get up.
that start a conversation, because what I'm planning to do is have seminars, and people are going to be inviting to sit down for a day and learn the model and begin to apply it and see what they can come up with. And
All right.
We
And the
will
book I also go into
tell
like,
everyone to look for your book. We will tell everyone to look for your book. And thank you very much, Dr. Arnold, for being on with us and how to access our power within. And as you know, on Urban Health Feed, we know that laughter is the best medicine. So I'm going to ask you something way out of left field. How do you catch a school of fish with a bookworm?
I got you.
All right, so with a bookworm, it was just a little theme on the book situation.
Yes.
All right, well, we can say which fish costs the most. A goldfish. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Arnold.
Okay.
We'll see you next time. Dr.
Okay.
David Arnold, author of The Pen and Psychiatrist. Things like very much. You've been listening to Urban Healthy with Marilyn Harris Davis and Dr. Garry Jennings. And remember, this is a work in progress. So work it.